Good afternoon. My name is Elian Ramos from Latism, and we're here live from the White House. This is part of a series of conversations after the President's State of the Union address. And I have here with me Cecilia Munoz, who is the White House Director of Domestic Affairs.
Policy, right?
Domestic policy. I'm sorry. And she will be answering your questions. For the past week, we've been asking you to send us questions through Latism for Cecilia about immigration reform. And I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about that. I have here my colleague, Cheryl Aguilar, and she will be monitoring Twitter. So you can send in your questions through the hashtags WHChat and SOTU, and also Latism. And so we'll be, for the next 30 minutes, we'll be taking in your questions, and also Cecilia is going to be giving you some of the answers. And so, Cecilia, thank you so much for sitting down with us. You know how important this issue is for our community and for a lot of people also outside of our community. And so your answers are going to bring a lot of light to the immigration reform and the President's plan for it. Do you have any opening remarks? Please?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Eliana, and thank you to everybody associated with Latism for being part of this. We're very grateful to have you here and to have your engagement. This is an incredibly important issue. This is a priority for the President. We have been living with a broken immigration system for far too long, and we have been struggling with a logjam in the Congress for far too long. But now it feels like that logjam is breaking, and we have an opportunity. This really feels like our moment to get immigration reform done. And so it's exciting that there's a bipartisan process underway. The President has put forward his principles for the immigration reform debate. You can find them on whitehouse.gov if you want to look at what the President is trying to achieve with immigration reform. But at the end of the day, while it's good that there's a bipartisan conversation, a conversation is not a bill. And we need a bill that can go through the process, get voted on, and get to his desk. So the President is going to continue to keep the fire burning under the feet of our colleagues in the Senate on both sides of the aisle so that we get to a bill. He said if their process gets bogged down, he'll introduce a bill of his own. This debate has started, and we're going to conclude it with legislation that we can all be excited about. So that's our goal, but we need every pair of hands and every voice out there to help us get this done. So let's have a conversation.
Well, the hands out there are all ready to hear your answers to the questions. So thank you so much for this. Let's go right into the questions. The first question comes from @BanneSmith777 from Twitter. And I got a lot of different versions for this one, so I kind of condensed them. The question says, both the Senate and the President's proposals for immigration reform agree that the pathway to citizenship begins at the back of the line, behind everyone who's legally waiting.
Yep.
But it turns out that there isn't one line, there are many lines. And so how does the administration propose to handle the expected backlog and to shorten the wait time for the million of undocumented immigrants out there?
This is a great question, and it's a really well-informed question because it's true. When we say get to the back of the line, we are referring to multiple lines, that if you are the spouse of a legal permanent resident, there's a line for you, but if you are the sibling of a U.S. citizen, there's a different line for you. So this is true, but there is a backlog of family immigration visas, and that's the line that we're referring to. But in some cases, that line can be 25 years long. So what the President is proposing is to add visas to the system each year for a number of years until we get the backlog dealt with, until the entire family immigration system backlog gets processed. And that's the line that we're asking the legalizing population to get in the back of. But the person asking the question raises a very good point. You can't just say the people who are legalizing come forward and get provisional status and then get to the back of the line. You also have to take steps to process that line. And that requires adding visas to the system, which is what the President is proposing to do. It's a great question.
Thank you. We have another question here, and this one comes from @MBlairSalas on Twitter. And her question says, although there's been bipartisan interest in making immigration reform a reality, there have been hints that the Congress majority would favor a piecemeal approach. and so instead of comprehensive action. So do you believe that the final product will be piecemeal versus comprehensive due to the lack of support? And what is your planned negotiation strategy to avoid the issue to get into a lockdown?
So this is also a great question. There are definitely, I mean, on the one hand, it's good news that we have partners on both sides of the aisle who are entering this debate, but it's also true that some of them are saying maybe we can do this in a piecemeal way. But look, Congress isn't going to do more than one immigration bill, right? They're not going to take this issue up 3 or 4 times. And you can't fix what's broken about the system in a piecemeal way. You have to look at the whole system and pass a comprehensive bill. So the president's going to insist that this be dealt with in a comprehensive way, because our goal here is not to just pass something with the name immigration on it so that everybody can say we've done that and get it behind them. Our goal is to actually fix what's broken about the system. And in order to do that, we have to pass a bill, and it has to be a comprehensive bill. So a piecemeal approach here isn't going to work. And frankly, a piecemeal approach is unlikely to have the votes that it needs. We have to do this in a way which deals with enforcement, which deals with a pathway to citizenship, and which fixes what's broken about the legal immigration system.
And in terms of the strategy, how are you going to go about it to convince the Congress to actually approve something that is humane?
Well, so the good news is that the principles that the bipartisan group in the Senate put forward, by and large, they're not 100% consistent, but they're largely consistent with what the president put forward. So that's a good sign. And frankly, the architecture of what we need in a comprehensive immigration reform is already well known. A bill passed the Senate in a bipartisan way in 2006. We know what needs to be in an immigration reform bill to fix the system. So the president's view is, and what he has said to the senators who were negotiating a bill is, you don't need to spend a lot of time on the substance and on the technicalities of this. We all know what needs to get done. You just have to make whatever political decisions you need to make to get on board with a proposal, and let's get on with it. So that's how the president is applying pressure, and we're feeling pretty confident this is going to be a comprehensive approach.
Great, great. We're now going to take a question from the hashtag WHChat, and the question comes from, who can we take this one? The question is, what do you think will be the timeline for passing reform?
Well, it better be quick, and that's the president's view. And he also made that clear. He gave a speech in Las Vegas about 3 weeks ago, and he made it very clear that, again, because we don't have to make a lot of policy decisions, we know what the policy is. So what he said is, if this Senate process gets bogged down, I'm going to give them some room to reach an agreement, but I'm not going to give them till forever. So if this process gets bogged down, I'm going to actually introduce a bill of my own and ask the Senate to vote on it. So he is aiming for a bill to go through the Senate, the Judiciary Committee this spring, and then go to the Senate floor, and then go to the House of Representatives. So this debate has started, and we expect the Congress to get to the place where it's voting within the next several months.
That's great. I have another question here that is related to the work visas and the STEM diplomas. So with the new focus on STEM, will professional work visa numbers, but not necessarily in the STEM field, also be bumped up? And are there any provisions that focus on low-skilled workers?
Yes, another great question. So STEM visas refers to visas for people in science, technology, engineering, and math. And what the way the president describes it is, it makes no sense for us to be training people from all over the world at our first-class universities and then not giving them the ability to stay and work or start companies in the U.S. We end up forcing them to leave, where they end up working for our competition or becoming our competition. So one of the provisions that we've talked about is providing access to visas for people getting master's degrees or PhDs in STEM fields. But in addition to that, we have to update the employment-based legal immigration system and the family-based legal immigration system. They haven't been updated since 1991, and they need structural changes and they need additional visas. So we are talking about reforming that system as well as adding visas for STEM fields.
Okay, and what about for the low-skilled workers?
Well, so that is a piece of the debate that the Senate is talking about. The president didn't put forward a proposal for, this is sometimes referred to as the future flow of workers that might come in the future. But we know that the Senate is talking about, and importantly, the labor movement and the business community are also talking with each other about what kind of program might make sense to bring in low-skilled workers in the future. So the administration's view is that we have been creating space for those folks to try to reach an agreement in the hopes that that can then be part of legislation.
Awesome, and thank you so much to follow the lead for sending in that question. We have another question now from the public out in the WH chat hashtag. What do you think will be, no, we have that one already. Pass me the other one, please. Thank you. This one is from Manny Velasquez Paredes, and his question is, I would like to know if there would be any policies to protect LGBT and their partners, spouses under proposed guidelines.
So the president's position on this is very clear, that LGBT families should be treated as families under our immigration reform laws. That's part of the principles that he put forward 3 weeks ago in Las Vegas. So the president's position on this is very clear. Having said that, this issue is going to get debated in the Senate. And so folks who care about this issue need to be ready for that debate. I expect that there will be votes on it, and we'll have to make sure that we're ready for that conversation.
Okay. The next question comes from a couple of people. One is Hilda Ramirez and Lawrence Pedrosa, and it's a combined question, so bear with me. What path would the Dreamers and farm workers have to take for citizenship, since they are supposed to be on the fast track? That's one. And will the new proposed immigration reform measures replace the recently enacted deferred action?
So let me start with the second one and then go to the first one. So deferred action is not a new law. Deferred action is an exercise of Secretary Napolitano's enforcement authority. What she's essentially said is people who fit the description that she put forward are not our high priorities for enforcement, and so they can come forward and ask for deferred action, which means deferring their enforcement action, and they can ask for work authorization, and that will be good for 2 years at a time, and people can renew it. So that's not permanent. It's not a pathway to citizenship. And presumably some future administration could decide not to renew it at some point. So those folks are still in need of a permanent solution. So in the proposals for a pathway to citizenship that the president has put forward, he contemplates that those folks, the Dreamers, are part of the 11 million. Farm workers are part of the 11 million. And so those folks would be able to come forward like everybody else to get on a pathway to citizenship. He is also proposing an expedited pathway for Dreamers if they enlist in the military or go to college for 2 years, which is similar to the provisions of the DREAM Act itself. So we're trying to replicate the DREAM Act as part of this overall position. But as the Dreamers themselves have put forward, this is, of course, about the DREAM Act and about that population, but it's also about everybody else. And the Dreamers have been really eloquent in saying, yeah, we want a permanent pathway to citizenship, but we also want our parents to have access. And that's important because we have to make sure that there is a pathway to citizenship for all of the 11 million if they qualify.
And there should be. So the next question comes now from Harris Melendez via Twitter. What anticipated effect, if any, will the crackdown on hiring undocumented persons have on the small business community? And conversely, what effect will these crackdowns have on employed undocumented persons?
Oh, this is another really good question. So it is already illegal for employers to hire people who are not lawfully authorized to work. And so what the new proposal would do, what the president's proposal would do, is to provide employers with a more reliable and efficient means to verify that the people that they hire are legally here, right? The standard that you can't hire somebody unless they're legally here was passed in 1986. So the sort of big piece of the enforcement proposal, if you will, is to give employers a mechanism to verify that their workers are here legally. we're designing it in such a way that it should be easy for small businesses to use. With the changes in technology, even over the last 10 years, this is a completely different debate now. So there are much stronger technologies available to help employers do this and to make sure that the system is reliable so that nobody who is legally authorized to work doesn't miss an opportunity to work because of problems in the system. So it should be efficient for employers to use, including small businesses. But the idea here is that there not be a job market for people who are here illegally. So we take the 11 million and put them on a pathway to citizenship, but part of the goal here is to close down access to jobs that are under the table where workers get exploited and employers are not following the rules.
Mm-hmm. So what would that path where you're gonna put the undocumented workers, what does that look like?
So the pathway to citizenship would allow people to come forward and they'd have to pass a background check. Mm-hmm. And they would get a provisional status right away after they pass the background check. That's the point at which they get to the back of the line, and as I've already said, we have provisions to clear out that line. Mm-hmm. And during that period, they would have to pay taxes and show that they're learning English. There's a fine and a fee associated with that. And then when they get to their place in line, under the president's proposal, they would apply for legal permanent residence, which gets them a green card. Mm-hmm. And like everybody else who has a green card, after 5 years, they'd be eligible for U.S. citizenship. So that's what the pathway looks like. And as the president said, it's not a quick path, it's not an easy path, but it's a fair path. It asks a lot of people, but it gets them to citizenship at the end.
I think that would be great. There's another question here, and this one I also grouped a couple of questions because this is the most popular question that I got out of all of them, and it relates to deportations and family reunification. Yep. As you know, that's something that affects it's borderline humanitarian crisis. Yep. And so the questions come from Pablo Manriquez, at Andy Fredis, Denise Carrion, and at Family Reunite. And the question says, deportations are at an all-time high. Is there a plan to stop current deportations for families with no criminal activity? How soon after reform is written into law will the deportation stop? How will the president's plan handle current cases of deportation involving children or spouses who are American citizens?
So these are great questions, and I get these questions a lot. So yes, this administration does have a vigorous enforcement record. Congress, under the broken set of laws that we have, Congress requires DHS to go after everybody who's deportable, and there are 11 million people who are deportable. Mm-hmm. And Congress, frankly, gives DHS a lot of resources to do that. Mm-hmm. DHS, for its part, under this administration, has for the first time put forward a strategy to prioritize among the 11 million who are their priorities for enforcement and who are not their priorities for enforcement. And the composition of who gets deported every year has changed a lot under these guidelines. But at the end of the day, the solution for the anguish of families who get separated under this broken immigration system is not going to be changes in enforcement policy. It's a bill. It's a piece of legislation. Because the thing which will lift from people the fear of deportation, the fear of having their families separated, is becoming legal residents, is getting on that path to citizenship. And so the solution here isn't going to be through changes in enforcement policy. It's going to be through legislation. And we have a chance to get that done in the near future, which is one of many reasons that it's so important. So the qualifications for legalization are going to be that folks are on, don't have criminal records, and are able to support themselves and other things. And folks who come forward to apply for legalization will be able to do it within a reasonable period after the law is passed. And once they come forward and get provisional status, they won't be subject to deportation unless they commit a crime of some kind.
Okay, that's a great answer, and I hope that it answered the doubts that people have out there, because that is one of the most common questions that I got. I want to remind everyone to please send in their questions through #WHChat. We've been getting a lot of questions, and thank you so much for sending this in. This one is from at Metro Latino USA. When it comes to healthcare for undocumented immigrants who are undocumented immigrants are not included in the healthcare package. Will there be any amendments to ensure that these people get services now?
So it is true that under the Affordable Care Act, the new health care law, people who are not in lawful status don't have access to participate in the exchanges. They can purchase insurance with their own money, but they don't get access to federal subsidies or federal tax credits. And that will also be true of the population that is legalizing under the president's proposal. They'll be able to buy insurance in the healthcare marketplaces with their own funds, but they won't get taxpayer-funded tax credits or subsidies. Healthcare is available also at community health centers to anyone, and this administration has also dramatically increased the resources for community health centers, knowing that there's going to be some portion of the population which isn't going to be eligible for coverage under the Affordable Care Act, at least for a while. But the other important thing is that once people are on a pathway to citizenship, once they're citizens, they're going to be treated like every other U.S. citizen. But at the end of the day, legalization has never been about access to benefits. It's always been about being able to be here legally and work and support yourself. And the important thing here is to get people on a pathway that leads to citizenship.
I have a question, just to follow up on the previous answer that you were giving about the families who are separated. What is the plan for dealing with the children who are who have been separated from their parents at this point?
So it's hard to give a general answer because each case is different. If there's a child who's been separated from a parent because the parent committed a felony and that was the reason that they were deported, there isn't going to be a lot that we can do. And so there isn't one whole entire answer that applies to everybody in this situation.
Non-criminal cases.
It's not clear. Some of this is going to depend on where Congress ends up. We have a large population within the United States that needs to get on a pathway to citizenship. It is a complicated matter to open that up to people who are not in the United States.
Wow. Well, the next question comes from at Shaima_Shamishka. Is that how you say it? Will the proposed change in immigration rules also grant permission to H-4 visa status women to work and contribute to the economy?
You know, I'm not certain of the answer to that question because I'd have to go back and look up what folks in H-4 visa status are. I suspect the answer to this is yes, but I would have to go back and double check that. I think this refers to folks who come in as spouses, so that their spouse comes in on a work visa and they come in on a visa that allows them to be here but not work. And if that is what an H-4 visa is, and I'd have to look it up, then the answer to that is yes.
Okay, and is there anywhere where people can look up this kind of information?
Well, so we have principles right now that are on the White House website. They're fairly detailed, but they're not as detailed as a piece of legislation. If we get to the point where the president is introducing a bill, then all of that is going to be spelled out in that legislation. We are hopeful that the bipartisan process in the Senate will produce a bill, but one way or another, within the next month to 2 months, all of this information will be available, either because the Senate has produced a bill or because we have.
Okay, I have one last question here. How are we doing with time?
We got a thumbs up.
5? Okay, the last question that I'm going to have, and we are about to wrap the session up. What can we as a community do better to advocate for comprehensive immigration reform in the months ahead? And this one comes from at Tony H.
So this is also a wonderful question. One of the many exciting things about this debate being where it is because so many people in our community put this debate there, right? We've had a logjam for a very long time. That logjam is broken because people in the community made it clear that it was time, that enough is enough, that we need to get this done now. And among the many exciting things is that people in our community and the Latino community feel empowered, but also that it's not just us, as you pointed out at the beginning, that there are people from all kinds of different communities that care about this, and that includes the business community and faith leaders and the labor movement and state and local governments, and this is a really big swath of the American public that cares about this.
And other nationalities
And
as
people
well.
of other nationalities as well, and people who are not immigrants at all. So there is a lot that we can do to demonstrate, one, that there is a lot of unity on this issue, that this issue has bipartisan support, it has the support of the vast majority of the public of the country, and that people are impatient to get this done. It's time, that it is not in our interest as a society, as an economy, to let this broken immigration system continue. The president has, I think, done a passionate job of making it clear that immigration reform is part of his economic vision for the future of this country, that we can't hope to be as successful as we need to be in creating jobs and making our country keeping our country first in the world in innovation, if we have a broken immigration system. And so I think the answer to your question is that the more we engage, the more we link arms with other constituencies that care about this and lift up our voices and insist, no, really, we meant it. It's time, and we're not going to put up with delays. We're not going to put up with obfuscation or roadblocks. We have to get this done. And to people on both sides of the aisle, if you're part of this and support it, there is plenty of political cover for you. There's plenty of room for you to do that, because this is what the country wants and it's what the country needs. And it's our voices which will make that case. This is our moment.
Yes, you heard that, people? Call Congress, call your representatives. So as I said before, Cecilia, we're running out of time. We are so happy that you gave us this half hour to really clarify a lot of the questions that people have out there. I wanted to give you a couple of minutes if you want to say some last words.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Eliane, for being part of this and for what you do at Latism, and thank you to everybody who's participating in this. And as I just said, this really is our moment. And this is something that we do not just because it lifts up the community, but because it lifts up the country. We are a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. Those are not incompatible things. And it's not just that we honor our past as a nation of immigrants by getting this right. This is really honoring our future and what we all bring to this country. And the president feels so passionately about this. He's going to insist that we get this done, but it's important to understand that he can't do this by himself. If that were true, if he could do it by himself, it would have been done 4 years ago. He needs us to engage, and he needs us to engage our friends, our neighbors, our communities to make sure that we have every pair of hands lifting this issue up until we get it over the finish line. But you can feel the ground shifting, and we have to build on that momentum until we get it done.
Yes, we're excited about it. So thank you so much again, and on behalf of immigrants like me, I know that like you, like yourself, I want to commend all of the work that the White House and really bipartisan work that is going on for this, and I think that now we just need to get it done. So
Amen.
Thank you very much. I want to a couple of reminders before we go. I'd like to thank the White House for inviting us to be here and giving us this platform to speak to Cecilia. And I want to thank everybody who's watching and who's been tweeting and sending in your questions. And especially I want to thank the Latism community for all the support. And I know that you guys are watching, so hello and thank you so much. And if you missed any part of the video, this is going to be posted on the White House website on their whitehouse.gov, and it's going to be also on the Latism blog. I'm going to be tweeting the link in a little bit so that you guys know where to find it. And thank you very much. I'm Eliane Ramos, and we are live from the White House. Ciao.